What's up, everybody? I'm Gabe Casper, and this is 3 Minutes or Less. So I grew up in the Christian church. Like, my dad is a pastor, my mom was a teacher at the Christian grade school I went to. I went to a Christian high school, Christian college, and then I spent 4 years in seminary after all of that. And so when I say I grew up in the church, I mean it. And yet, despite what some may consider an uber-religious upbringing, faith was never a given for me. It's not that I can recall long periods of unbelief, but I just always wrestled with what it meant for me to be a Christian. There were activities in the church I was confused about. Like, I was like, why do we do these things? Beliefs that I struggled embracing. And then there were Christians who I engaged with who, let's just be honest, were not terribly loving or kind people. And so for me to really come to grips with what I believed, I had to sort through all that. And eventually, by the grace of God, I've landed in a place where I think I have some clarity on what it means for me to be a Christian. And this process of sorting through what one truly believes and what they truly hold to is really important and can be really edifying. And yet, it's also a spiritually precarious place to be. See, right now, it seems to me at least that many in the church in North America are wrestling with what it means to be a Christian. And for many, it falls under this name, deconstruction. And there's a lot to say about deconstruction that I'm not going to go into, but if you want me to do another video on it, I'd be happy to. But for now, I'll frame it this way. The Catholic theologian Richard Rohr describes faith development as involving 3 steps. He says there's construction, which is where you build your system and worldview, deconstruction, where you challenge that worldview and subsequent beliefs, and reconstruction, where you rebuild a new, more holistic set of beliefs and worldview. And in one sense, of course, that's really healthy, right? Because there are things in the church that are not part of the gospel that get tangled up in it and can really throw us off. And so it's important to look for those things and deconstruct them and then reconstruct for a better view. But in another sense, and in a way that I find particularly concerning right now, one can deconstruct their faith and just leave it there. Or reconstruct their faith in such a way that it bears almost no resemblance to the historic teachings of the Christian church. And so if you're in a process of deconstruction, let me just encourage you to think about your end game. Is your goal clarity or capitulation? If your goal is clarity on the gospel, clarity on who Jesus is, on what it actually means to follow him, on what exactly this faith is that people have bled and died for and continue to bleed and die for over the centuries, well, then that's a great way to reconstruct, a great way to try and clear the air. But if your goal is capitulation, if your goal is to find a way for the message of the cross to be more palatable to you, to conform the gospel to the whims of the fashion of our current cultural moment, friend, if that's your end game, you're just going to be left with nothing but rubble. In Matthew 16, Jesus says, I will build my church. Jesus is in the construction business. Not just because he was a carpenter. It's good to clear away the branches from the beauty of what he's built, but to try and tear it down is an exercise in futility.